My name is Ryan Dunn. I'm a minister and online content creator who's always looking for resources, ideas, and community that lead us to making spiritual connections with new people in digital space. Pastoring in the Digital Parish is all about providing that and more for those of us engaged in digital ministry, whether we're a full-time online campus pastor or a volunteer church communicator or a solo pastor trying to hold together a dispersed congregation. We've talked previously on this podcast about the fact that our behaviors in digital space are often self-focused. When we engage with online content, we're generally doing so for the benefit of ourselves. We consume things selfishly. At least, that has been my working hypothesis for much of the online content I create. Dr. Kelly Price is going to put that hypothesis to the test as she speaks with us about digital consumer behavior. In other words, she's going to give us an in-depth perspective on why many of us do the things we do online. Recognizing these motivations offers us some great ideas on how we can more effectively meet and build relationships with people through digital content. This is a really interesting topic and conversation. I'm glad you're with us. Let's meet our adjunct professor. Dr. Kelly Price is with us. She's an associate professor and master of digital marketing program for East Tennessee State University. She presents at conferences, and her research interests are women's golf, consumer behavior, and online teaching. Certainly a couple of things that are extremely relevant for our audience. Kelly, thank you so much for reaching out and joining in this session of Pastoring in the Digital Parish. Hope you're doing well today.
Doing great. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it. So this is a wonderful podcast. I recommend it highly to everyone. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Cool. Well, I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about this session because we're covering consumer behavior, and that's not a topic that I know an awful lot about. So if we can kind of drop down to the base level, if you can provide for us kind of a working definition of what consumer behavior is, like what are you focusing on in your study of that?
Absolutely. Well, most people will say they don't know a lot about consumer behavior, but all of us are one. So
yeah, true.
We consume a little bit of everything every day. I actually wrote down a textbook definition, okay. And then I'll give you that one, and then I can give you my version as well. But let me read this one to you and see what you think. Consumer behavior is the study of individuals, groups, or organizations and the processes they use to select, secure, use, and dispose of products, services, experiences, or ideas to satisfy needs and the impacts that these processes have on the consumer and society.
Okay.
So there you go.
That's a lot. All right.
It is a lot. It's a mouthful. But it does incorporate, organizations, and that includes faith-based organizations. Now, my version of consumer behavior it's the psychology side of marketing. We have the analytics side. You hear a lot about that, inside of digital marketing, the analytics, and you've talked to several people on this podcast who have addressed that. But we also have the psychology side. This is the side that asks why. I tell my students this all the time. The analytics are really awesome, and we need them and use them a lot. But there's a person behind those numbers who are generating those numbers. Why are they doing this? How did we get to that number? So that's what consumer behavior is, just looking around, just asking a whole lot of questions of why.
Okay. Well, yeah. Speaking of why is it so interesting to you? Why have you chosen this as a course of study?
Well, I have a pretty heavy retail background, apparel buying, that type of thing. And anytime that I think I've seen everything, then something else would happen. Consumers are just fascinating to me. Everybody is a case study waiting to happen, in my opinion. It's just fascinating to watch why people do things, why they buy things, why they don't, why they like this brand, why they don't. It's just, all those values and motivations certainly play into consumer behavior. It's something that's never ending, and it changes all the time, so it's just fun to watch. It's people watching for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in doing this podcast is that in church world, we don't like to kind of talk about things from a marketing aspect. Like for some reason, marketing terms just, they make us in church world a little bit uncomfortable. And that is something that's totally like a wall that's internal for us, because we engage in so many marketing behaviors. So why might consumer behavior be important for churches or ministries or faith groups to be aware of?
Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan, I totally get what you're saying from the church aspect. And since I've been so involved, as a certified lay minister, as from the UMW leadership perspective, there's a lot of marketing that still happens. It's almost like marketing gets a bad rap.
Totally.
They're trying to trick people, manipulate consumers. And yes, there's certainly that. I teach an ethics course, and we get into a lot of that, digital marketing ethics. So yes, there is a fine line, but churches need marketing because, it doesn't matter. Consumer behavior happens wherever consumers are present, and that counts for church. It's important that we investigate all these behaviors that people have. We'll talk more about that in a minute, I'm sure, of these external and internal motivations and habits, that churches care about. So I would encourage church leaders to think about marketing in a sense that can still do good. Marketing can still be a good thing. It's just sort of like social media. We see so much bad stuff, but gosh, social media does such good as well.
Yeah. Well, and marketing just isn't about kind of dollars and cents, is it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I heard it expressed that marketing can actually be the opening of a relationship. If we think about it in that terms, like that is certainly appropriate for the church world, because we talk about faith being a relationship. Like this is kind of what we are in the quote unquote business to do, right? It's to open up relationships.
Absolutely.
Well, when it comes to consuming digital content, I love that you're able to kind of put these two things together, not just the consumer behavior, but also our lead in digital content. So in consuming digital content, like what are we seeing as some motivations? What have you noticed people are looking for when they're like surfing around online?
Yeah. And why are they doing that? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Motivation is the reason for the behavior. Okay. So I mentioned a second ago this external and internal influences. And what I mean by that, because that leads to motivation. External influences are things like that impact us and impact our behaviors, purchase behavior and all other behaviors, but we're talking about purchase here, or consumer behavior here. Those are like culture that you grow up in, the values that you have, things like that. The people that are around you, we call them reference groups. Your reference groups, like your friends, your parents, things like that. But we also have these internal influences that are formed. Those are learning or self-concepts, memory, attitudes, those types of things. And those lead into why we do things, the reasoning of it all. There's a bunch of really boring theories that I could go into, of course, but I have to tell you one of my favorites. It's called the McGuire theory, and it's been around since 1960-ish or so. And what this theory says, and this is very applicable to church, is that there are four main categories of why people do things. And one of them is affective. That's the feeling, the feeling we have about something. The cognitive, which is what we believe about something, what we're thinking. And sometimes those two things can clash. But we also have something called preservation, a preservation motive. And that means we're just trying to maintain what we're doing. We're kind of keeping things where they are because we like it. And then the last one has to do with growth. And growth is we're doing something to grow ourselves. We're doing something to make things better or whatever. So you have these four main categories of why people are thinking about doing things, you see. So that's a motivation. And discovering those motives, I think one of the most interesting things about consumers is that they don't realize often that they have motivations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we have these latent versus manifest motives. The latent ones are the ones that they don't really want to admit, and the manifest ones are the ones that they will admit. You know, like, oh, I need that brand new bright red sports car. Well, you know, you may not acknowledge you want to feel younger, but you'll say, oh, well, I need it because, you know, it goes fast or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so those motivations can vary quite heavily.
Yeah. Well, from the educational world, have you noticed that there are certain motivations that lead people, like any one specific motivation that lead people towards engaging with a particular piece of content or signing up for a particular course?
Mm-hmm. You know, some of it's convenience. We have so many students who are working at various hours. They have families, they have other obligations. And so my program happens to be 100% online. So they can engage whenever they want to. And I know that you've addressed that before as well, that we are consuming products, church included, when we want to and how we want to. So same thing with education as well. So convenience is a factor, but there's all these other motivations that are pushing it as well.
Okay. In talking about that, is you've made this shift from, I assume at one point you were like 100% in the classroom teaching people, and now have shifted to a total digital focus. Do you think the efficacy of or quality of your teacher to student engagement has changed?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of a funny story because yes, I was on ground for years and enjoyed it, loved it. And then one day, my dean came to me and she said, we're going to start this new program. It's 100% online. It's a master's degree. We want you to head it up. We want you to get it on the ground, get it moving. And I was like, I don't know. I really love being in the classroom. I love seeing my students' faces. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, she
said,
well, you're going to do it anyway.
Right. Familiar motivations I hear.
Yeah. So I had to. But after I got in it, and now that I've been in it for a while, I don't know that I don't want to go back. And the reason is my students are just as engaged. And what's interesting is that on ground, let's say I had a pretty big class. I would teach classes that had 100 people in them. So I would see those people, those students, twice a week, hour and a half. Some of them come in, they go out. I don't ever talk to them. But online, I know everybody. I engage with them somehow. They're so open to talking with me. I know their dogs' names and what they do for a living and, all that type of stuff. So I'm actually more engaged with my students in the digital environment than I was on ground. So yes, absolutely. The education, the quality, the rigor is no different. In fact, some studies say it's better.
Why do you think you're more engaged with them, or they're more engaged, period?
It's a comfortable space for me. You do have to learn some of the tools of how to do that. We use a platform at my university, and most universities have something like that. But there are different tools on there of chat features and videos and all that type of stuff that are pretty easy to use. And you just have to learn how to use those and how to get people involved. And they will. If you give them the shot, they will.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll bet each one of us could probably name like something that we're doing online now that we formerly did in person and thought like, oh, this is something that we could only do in person, right? But in terms of the research that you've done, have you noticed some trends over the past 2 years that people are increasingly moving from, I guess, from an in-person standpoint to consuming this or interacting in this particular sphere primarily through digital means?
I mean, there's a yes and no component to that. That yes, we have certainly changed how we've done things. It was almost like a forced motivation, as we said. We had to do some of those things, but it's almost like we were moving that way anyway. It just happened a lot quicker, and that's true for education as well. So yes, when and how we consume, where we consume it has all changed. in consumer behavior, we know that it takes about 60 days or so to break a habit or make one. And, people went out of church pretty quickly. And we stayed out for longer than 60 days.
Yeah.
So something changed there, most likely. There was a habit that changed. So getting people sometimes back in the building is going to be a little tougher because it's been over 60 days and it's tough to change that.
Yeah.
So yes, things have changed, but no on the other side, because as we mentioned a minute ago, those external influences that impact people like culture and values maybe did not change. My values as a Methodist or whatever you want to say is still the same in the middle of the pandemic and on its way out, hopefully, has not changed. And that's how consumers will tend to operate. We're tough cookies. We don't like change a lot.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, my mom uses Tide, so I use Tide kind of things. So it'll stick with us.
Well, as we kind of look at consumer trends, like in church world, we don't necessarily want to be riding consumer trends. Like there's an aspect where we hope to influence some of the behavior. So maybe what are some ways that from a church standpoint or ministry standpoint, we can begin to influence some consumer attitudes?
Yeah. Consumer attitudes, in my opinion, it's one of the toughest things to do in marketing, in digital marketing, consumer behavior. So it's a big job. Attitude formation is generally long-term, and we learn it pretty early. Sometimes you'll see brands that, this person will drive a certain car brand and that's it, and nothing can change their minds, and they wouldn't be caught dead in another one. That type of thing. It's the Ford Chevy kind of argument. But we learn these attitudes from somewhere. It could be families, it could be ads, it could be on social media. And so we're forming these attitudes, and they get pretty deep-seated sometimes, or most of the time. But where the opportunity lies for churches and for any brand really is that when we form these attitudes, we either have a positive, a negative, or a neutral attitude. And so the positive people, that's good, that we have a positive attitude about brand X, about this church or whatever. The negative, it's a little tougher. The neutral, there's the opportunity. We've got people sitting on the fence. So that's a good thing. But to try to change some of those attitudes, we have some strategies to do that. We can try to change the cognitive, as I was saying a minute ago, about thinking. And to do that, we have to help consumers by changing their beliefs about us or add beliefs. That might be as for a product, we added so much of this ingredient kind of thing. So it's better, than it was. So we try to change what you think about it. Or we can try to change how you feel about us. Again, that's pretty tough. But one of the ways we do that is through just exposure, over and over and over and over. And that's what those ads do. That sometimes it pop up so much.
Yeah.
Well, eventually the exposure gets to you. It's like a jingle that just won't go away, but eventually it may grow on you a little bit, or you're still singing it. But another way that we can change it is behaviorally. We're going to try to change how you behave. And again, that's a tough one. One of the ways that we do that is to market the reward.
Okay.
If you do this, it's almost like a classical conditioning thing. If you do this, this will happen kind of thing. I read a study the other day. It was pretty interesting, and I wrote my note down here about one of the findings that the more people anticipate getting a social benefit from church-related activities, the higher their extent of participation. So if they perceive that they're getting these social benefits, this behavior, then their extent of participation will go up. So that's a good thing. But yeah, and sometimes it's weird though, because consumers will behave different than how they think. Like you could say, I do not like this restaurant, but my friend wants to go there, so I will go there. So you're doing something different. You're behaving differently than how you think or feel about something. Yeah. So it's a tough go on attitudes.
So when you're talking about social benefit, does that just mean that like we're going to be able to make friends or interact with people?
Exactly. It's
Okay.
just like communicating with a brand on social media. We, as a brand, we want to communicate with you. We want to build the relationship with you long term.
Hmm.
So same thing here. Those social benefits of feeling good about it and building that brand community, and churches can do that,
Yeah. Okay. So from the
and they're good
aspect
at
of
it when they
like,
want to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
from the aspect that we really want to get to know you
Mm-hmm.
type.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, are there some examples that you can think of where churches are kind of leaning into some of these motivations or like driving consumer behaviors?
Mm-hmm. I've seen. I'm just trying to think of a few of the churches, locally that I've seen. What's interesting is that you can be driving down the road and see on a car like a sticker, and it's a logo of one of those churches,
Hmm.
and you boom, you know it. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I haven't seen a flame on anything around here. Where's our logo? Where's my sticker? Some of those churches are very good at selling the reward
Yeah.
and putting that logo out there and saying, here's what you're going to get if you come here. And they can be aggressive about it, not in a bad way, but they can be marketing aggressively, and those parking lots are full.
Hmm.
When I go by there. Now, that's also to say that a full parking lot doesn't mean quality. So in
Yeah, sure.
marketing, we say, well, you can have 5 million followers, but if 500 are the quality ones, that's who you really want to engage with,
Hmm.
So there's a back and forth with having the logo on your car, if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still thinking about the social benefits of like as we engage with content online. Maybe we'll get specific and say like through Facebook. What are some of the, I guess, benefits that deliver? Does that make sense? Like as we're looking to post content on a weekly basis, daily basis for our institutions, what might be the content that really kind of plays into or meets the demand, so to speak, of
Yeah.
the consumers who we're interacting with?
Mm-hmm. That's actually a really good question. I've read some studies about that, and we're seeing that sometimes the timing of these posts are even more important than the emotional or social factor.
Really? Okay.
Yes, we're starting to see timing as being an issue. Um, there is no really perfect post, and we talk about that in my social media class a lot, because someone will come in and say, well, what can I do to make this perfect post? And everybody
Right.
will
We
get
all want to
it.
know the secret
Oh
sauce.
man,
Yeah.
no, consumer behaviorists will say, sorry,
Mm.
that's not happening. It's never going to happen. The analytics are good, but people are behind that number, so it's going to change. Um, but we're seeing that, you know, a lot of brands will play on these appeals, like fear appeal or
Yeah.
um, emotional appeal, humor. Humor works. Humor's a good thing. And church isn't supposed to be funny, but it can be humorous. It can still have a personality.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
Yes.
that's another way of thinking of it, is not,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not trying to kind of cut towards it. A lot of times our humor goes to cutting towards it or into something, but maybe we
Mm-hmm.
just want to think about it as kind of like having a bit of a frivolous personality.
It's
That's good.
okay. Yes, your church absolutely can have a personality. My church's personality is very different from
Hmm.
First Church in town. We do different things. Yes, we have a lot of the same values, but our personalities are different, just like people. So it's okay to do that. Hmm.
And, so talking about timing, then, are there trends in timing that we should be aware of?
It depends on the brand,
Okay.
unfortunately. Sorry.
Yeah.
It really depends. And analytics do help that. If you see that, you're getting a lot of engagement between 12 and 1 lunchtime on a Monday, yes. But, with faith-based organizations, I haven't seen anything particularly different that's crucial for us to know that, yes, you need to have this on here on Friday at 5 o'clock type of thing. But it really depends on who that audience is and who you're trying to get in there or not. Mm-hmm.
So the invitation might be to just kind of play around with it.
I would, yes, absolutely play around with it. And then as soon as you figure it out, it'll change.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sorry.
But my now probably 3-year-old practice of posting every day at 8:30 may not be the best.
May not get it. No,
Gotcha.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the element of surprise is kind of fun. When people shop online, they love the art of the deal. They love flash sales. It's just fun because, shopping is it's entertainment. It is entertainment. It's something that people love to do together. That's why, retail stores are still going to be around. They're not going away anytime soon. People enjoy the experience of it. And that's no different from this. So it's fun to have the element of surprise. Oh, your pastor's going to go live in so-and-so. You'd be surprised at how many people would kind of go for that. Yeah. So it's still fun to do things like that. Make it fun.
Yeah. Well, and I was trying to imagine, I think part of the thrill of shopping is that it is time sensitive, right? Especially when we start talking about a deal that's going to end in 2 days, right?
Yes.
Like we want to get in there, say we got that deal before it ended, right?
Absolutely.
And I was trying to think of some ways of, well, how do we, in the church world, how do we kind of play into that sense of urgency or the thrill of urgency? Have you seen that happening either like within the church institution or in the educational institution?
You know who's really good at this in retail world is QVC.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Where you have hours, right?
Yes, this price will go away at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. People really go for that, but it's fun to them. It's a motivation. With education, time can be a factor because a lot of times when I talk to potential students, the first thing they'll say is, "How long will it take me to finish this program?"
Yeah.
And so there's a flexibility there that we can play with. But so time is a factor, and we use that a lot in marketing of short-term benefits. This coupon is good until so-and-so, So churches may be able to incorporate a little bit of that, of not a negative type of urgency. Oh, you're going to do that. You need to do this before something happens, and and institute that fear appeal. Mm-hmm. But more of a time, an emotional appeal maybe, or let's think about this type of thing. A post that may get people thinking, and maybe something like, answer this before the end of the day. Your preacher's going to come back on and talk about it. I mean, so you can use time in a really good way that won't make people feel uptight, but can still say that it's okay and use time to your benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
In thinking about our audience, I think probably most of us have some experience now in digital marketing, but not necessarily have much training in digital marketing. And maybe that's similar to some of your incoming students. So in aligning us with those prospective students, like, are there some attitudes or ideas that you see a lot of them coming in with that they need to be disavowed of pretty quickly? Like some commonly held misconceptions of new students? Yeah,
that's a good question. We generally have 2 groups of students that come in. One of the groups is the professionals. They're already working. They're already in digital marketing. And they come in with such a analytics mindset that they, and that's okay. Please don't think that that's a bad thing. But there's just this whole other side of strategy and research and consumer behavior and the why part. So I kind of have to push them a little bit back and say, okay, this is great, but let's look at this other side. And then the students will come in and they think just that digital marketing is social media and that's it. All they know is TikTok.
Yeah,
and that is it. I'm like, but there's a whole nother world out there, and social marketing or social media is just one of the tools of many. Yes, you probably need it, but not everybody needs it. but we need to step back and see that social media is not the end of the world.
Okay.
You have to have it. Yeah. So I have to break that mold just a little bit. Let them see the full picture.
Yeah. Well, expand that horizon for us. What else is there?
Well, you've got to look at the consumer behavior side. Yes, you have addressed so many in this podcast that were so good of the tools and, with Twitch. And, we've talked about Twitch for years in my classes, and it's been really fun to watch that progression of how that platform has moved. But then what people start getting, even my own pastor said this, I need to be on TikTok. And I'm like, well, why? You need to pick your platform or pick what you want to do. And I see that a lot with church colleagues that say, well, I've got to fix this Facebook. I've got to do. And I'm like, let's pull it back just for a second and do what's genuine, because consumers they can see something that is not genuine in a split second. They can see right through a marketing campaign that is not real or doesn't feel good or is too much,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm thinking of it's been a couple of years. There was a Super Bowl ad that was it was a downer. And now I don't even remember who it was, but everybody was like, what just happened right there? We're having a good time. Everybody, these commercials are great. And then somebody puts this horrible commercial. I want to say it was insurance or something. And it just ruined the mood for everybody, So anyway, consumers will see through something that is not genuine. So just be your personality self. Yeah. Okay. You don't have to be on every single platform. In fact, that will be a bad thing.
Yeah.
In the end, yeah.
Yeah. So don't just jump on the space to be on the space or to have your face in the space.
You got to pick. You got to pick your battles on that one. So it's okay not to be everywhere. And like I said, in fact, you shouldn't, because then you'll get on, let's say, Twitter or whatever, and then you don't post for 3 weeks. Well, because you're trying to do something on TikTok, and then it's just out of control. Yeah. It doesn't do good for the brand at all.
Right. Okay. Well, this has been such a good introductory conversation for us into consumer behavior, especially as it relates to the digital world. I know that we have just scratched the surface. So I'm going to kind of pick your mind off the top of your mind here. But what are some resources that we might want to consider for like taking the next step? Like, where can I get some more information on consumer behavior, especially as it might apply to like ministry in the digital world?
A few places, of course. Just some general random searching online will at least give you, just consumer behavior issues. It's like we said in the beginning, consumers are everywhere. We are all one. So you can just look at the news and see what's happening in consumer behavior. Another really good place professionally, our practitioner organization is the American Marketing Association. And they post a lot of wonderful things. Now you have to be a member to get to all of the content, but they still have a lot of good introductory content there as well. So, you may want to take a course in consumer behavior, because I tell my students this all the time. I'm like, think about your courses, and you tell me one of them that would be around if you didn't take consumer behavior. Would any of the other ones be around if consumers weren't in them? Like retailing and all those other things. I'm like, no. So understanding the consumer at their core is super important. So that might be a useful thing as well. But again, consumerism is everywhere. So you can get things out of magazines and whatever, and just sort of understand that basic idea of what consumer behavior is.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Any particular magazines that might be of super help? Like, are there particular resources that you go back to again and again?
I look at some practitioner things like AMA, but some other things like Fast Company. I think they're really good at looking at consumer behavior, and Mashable and things like that. But yeah, those are my main ones. And of course, I get into some of those really boring scholarly journal articles that most people don't want to get into, and that's okay. But so you can find consumer behavior almost anywhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Price, thank you so much for spending this time with us, giving us this little introduction. Where would be a good spot to kind of check out some of your work?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I'm at East Tennessee State University and the digital marketing program there. So if you just Google that, you'll get right to my the main website there, and you can always email me. My email address is on there, so that's where you'll find everything.
Great. Well, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in this session, friend. If you'd like to continue in conversation about this topic or any topic we discuss on Pastoring in the Digital Parish, then check out our Pastoring in the Digital Parish Facebook group. If you'd rather keep listening, that's much appreciated too. If you enjoyed this episode, then you'll probably get really into our episode with Mike Kim about building relationships through branding, or you might get into our conversation with Dana Malstaff about building engaging Facebook groups. Again, my name is Ryan Dunn. Big thanks to United Methodist Communications for sponsoring this podcast. Check out more at resourceumc.org. This episode is coming out near the closing of season 2. In fact, there are just 2 episodes left until we take a little holiday break, so don't miss them. And with that, I'll be back with you next week when we talk about time-saving content creation tips with Dan Wunderlich. Peace.